In this video, we're going to take a look at Access 2013, Chapter 3, Skill-Based Training. And with this particular chapter, we're going to start to take some of the functionality we learned in Excel with formulas, and we're going to add it to Access to make Access a little bit more functional for us. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new query, and we're just going to use query design. We're going to include the agents table and the properties table. We need to do those in that order. And we're going to add in the first name and the last name fields. I'm just double clicking on these. And we're also going to add in list price from the properties field. Scroll down a little here. And we're going to add in square feet. And we're going to add in the sold field. So we've got a pretty good query here with a bunch of different data, and because these tables are linked, we're going to have the appropriate first and last name linked to those properties, the appropriate agent name. We're going to run this query. We're going to take a look and see that that does work. So all of these particular properties sold by a particular salesman will be linked together, even though the data is in the two separate tables. Now we're going to go back to Design View, and we're going to add no to the criteria of the sold field. So now we're only going to show things where the sold field is set to no. And we're going to sort this query by the list price field in ascending order. And now we're going to save this query as price per SQFT. Price per SQFT. And no period on that. And then we'll save it and we will run the query. And now only the fields where sold is equal to no are going to show, and they're also sorted by list price. So now we're going to do something a little different. All of what we have here is data, and we're just looking at our data in a different way. But now we're going to add in a new field, price per SQFT. And then we're going to hit a colon after that, and then a space. And we're going to calculate the list price field divided by the square feet field. Notice we're not just going to add this data to our table, because if we change our square feet, we need our price per square feet to change. If we change our list price, we need our price per square feet to change. It needs to dynamically reflect what the data is telling us. So in order to write these, we're going to use the flat brackets, and we're going to do a bracket and then list price, and then close your bracket, and then divided by, open your bracket, and SQFET. And then when we click off of that, my IT lab updates to make sure that your query was right, or your formula was right. And we're going to press enter or click off of it just so my IT lab can grade it. And then we're going to run that query. And we can't see it here yet. We're going to look at it in a bit. But we can tell that it worked because it didn't prompt us for anything. You're going to notice in a couple steps down, if it prompts us, it means something didn't go right. So we're going to save this query. Now we're going to take a copy of that query. We're not actually duplicating any data, because remember, query is just a way to look at your data. It's a specialized view of that data. And sometimes we throw in these special fields too with calculations. So we're going to right click and copy. We're going to click down here in some open space and paste. And when we do this, we're going to make this new query named price per SQFT formatted, and say OK. Right now it's identical. All of the data is the same, the formula is the same. But now we're going to open this new one in Design View. We're going to format the price per square foot calculated field as currency. So click on that field somewhere, right click, and go to Properties. And here in the Format space, in the Format property, we're going to just choose currency. Now every time we look at that data, it's always going to show us that data in a currency format. We're also going to add in a caption of price per SQFT, no period, and press enter. Now we're going to run the query. You'll notice your calculated field here, the one that calculates this divided by this, it looks a lot nicer. It's a lot more user friendly. And now we're going to save that query. With queries, every time we make these changes, we will need to save them just so that we lock in those changes. Now we're going to create a new column, and we're going to intentionally mess this up. Now, that doesn't mean that you can type in the wrong thing to MyITLab. We still have to type in exactly what MyITLab wants, but we're going to see what happens if we put in this calculated field incorrectly. So we're going to name this one wrong price per SQFT, all one word, a colon and a space, and then for the calculation it's going to be X list price divided by X SQFEET, and the caps are important. Now notice this time I didn't actually put in the brackets, but we are able to still tell that that is correct because Access is smart enough to look over here and see, okay, if it were a real field, I'd find it. This is a fake field anyway, and we're actually looking for an error here. So we're going to actually change this as well to currency, so do it the same way you did with the other one. Change that property to currency, and in our caption we're going to put in wrong price per SQFT and press enter. Now when we run this query, we're prompted, because Access doesn't know what X list price is, we're prompted to put in that information. If Access can't find a value for that, it is going to assume that it's something that you're going to put in on the fly to make this query work. So we're just going to kind of fudge the numbers here, and we're going to say 100,000 for the list price, and we're going to put in 1,000 for the X square feet. And now every time you divide 100,000 by 1,000, it's always going to equal 100, and that's why our wrong price field is always 100. Wherever we put in that value, it's always going to keep that same data. We're going to go back to Design View, and we're going to change that field. We're going to fix it. Now you'll notice that Access has actually put in our brackets for us because it knew that it wasn't a proper function, and it knew it had to be some other field that we're asking for. So we're going to take out the X's that we had put in originally that intentionally were there to make this wrong. So we'll click off of that. MyITLab can recognize that we've made our change, and we'll run our query. And now you'll notice the data is the same because our function is actually the same with the same data. But that's actually really good information for troubleshooting purposes. If you ever see that prompt come up, it means you probably typed something in wrong in your function, because usually we don't intend to enter data when we run a query. That's usually not something we're really after. We're going to take a look at our calculated results now in Excel. You can actually pull these out and toss them over in Excel if you like to work with Excel a little bit more. And we're going to make a new field here in G2. It's going to equal C2 divided by D2, and we'll press enter, and you're going to see that even though this is currency and then this one is just a normal decimal number, you can see that our calculation here that we made in Excel is really doing the same thing that the Access query, the Access function is doing. We're going to drag this down and copy that out, and you'll see, if you look really quick, that all of the data and all of the math does align. So what Access is doing and what Excel is doing is exactly the same math, and it's going to give you exactly the same accurate results. Now we're going to use something new. We're going to use the expression builder. It's a really nice way to build these expressions in in Access, because we don't have to memorize all of the different parameters. Now, for those of you that did the payment function in Excel, you're going to notice it's a whole lot easier to do the payment function here now, because it's going to tell us exactly what needs to go where, and we just plug in the numbers. So we're going to use the expression builder on this price per square foot column, and so we'll click on the price per square foot, and we're going to go to the builder. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this formula. You can change it by clicking down here. All of our tables are in here, all of our functions are in here. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to modify what I see up here. And I'm going to change it from price per SQFT to price per BR. Here we're looking at the price per bedroom. So we're going to modify this formula. So now it's price per BR, and it's going to be list price divided by the number of beds in the house. And I'm just going to delete out the square foot parameter here, and I'm going to go in and find our beds. I'm going to find that data. I can go in through our database file here, tables, queries, forms, reports. I'm looking for data, and I'm looking for data about the property. So I can go into property, and there's a field called beds already in there. I can double click on that, and now you'll see it pops up here, properties exclamation point beds. It's saying in the properties object, in the properties field in this the properties table in this case, there's a field named beds, and that's the data we're working with. So anytime you see this exclamation point, it's only further qualifying where we're finding that data. And then now that our formula is correct, we'll say OK. And we're going to close the expression builder we just did, and we're going to change the caption. We're going to go into the properties again. We're going to change that caption to price per bedroom. We'll press enter. We're going to close the property sheet. And now we're going to create another new field called price per room. We're going to use the expression builder for this one too, but this one we're going to build from scratch. You can use the expression builder to modify or create brand new fields. We're going to call this one price per room, no spaces. We'll put in a colon and a space, and we're going to divide the list price by the number of beds plus the number of bathrooms plus 3. And that's going to tell us how expensive this particular property is based on the number of rooms. So I can go look for beds again under tables, under properties. So I've got one thing I need first is I need that list price. So I want list price divided by, and now this is where some of our math gets tricky. If I divide by beds plus baths plus 3, order of operations is going to do the list price divided by beds before it does the addition. Multiplication and division are always higher in the order of operations than addition and subtraction. So I actually need to use a parenthesis now to enclose the things I'm adding up. So I want beds plus baths plus the number 3, and I'll close my parentheses and say OK. And that goes in there OK. We're going to go down here and change the caption to price per room in properties. Price per room. And we'll press enter. You may wonder, why are we putting all these captions in here? You may notice we never put spaces in our field, but we always write out something a little bit more plain English, if you will, in our caption. We want to view this as users, but we want to use this no space field in our formulas. Next thing we'll do here is we will run the query. We're going to see if that works, and there is our new price per room. We haven't formatted it to currency yet, but it is there and it's calculating out that price. We're going to add in some new criteria, and this is going to go into the list price field. It's going to limit down the number of results returned when we run this query. So we're going to go with less than or equal to 150,000, and we'll press enter. And we're going to add a new column, and this one is going to calculate the payment for a loan with these various details. Now, you might think, I don't remember exactly how that payment field works. So we can go to the builder, and we're going to select, well, first thing we'll do, we're going to say that this name is going to be payment, colon, space. And now we know we want to run the payment function for this, because we're calculating the payment for a loan, and this is something many of you did in the Excel chapter as well. So we'll go into functions, we'll go into the built-in functions, and I'm just going to leave it here as all because I know exactly the expression that I'm looking for. I'm going to go down to PMT, double click on that one, and you'll see it fills in all the different pieces of data that I need to work with. So my rate is 0.06 divided by 12. I have 360 payment periods, and my present value is the list price multiplied by 0.80. So present value should be list price. Normally I'd go in here and I'd look at my table. My IT lab doesn't actually have it populated. In real access you would see it because it really does exist. Don't be fooled by this, it's just that my IT lab doesn't have it in there. I think they want you to see how to do it the hard way. So we'll do bracket list price, bracket, and then times 0.80. Our future value is 0, and our type is 0. Double check your work, make sure you've got everything right. It's very easy to make a mistake when there's so many different pieces of information here, but syntactically it actually looks pretty good. So we'll say OK. Our formula goes down in here. We're going to format that as currency. Right click properties, and under format we'll choose currency. We're going to revise the payment field to add a negative sign before the list price field. You might remember this one. Whoops, we're going to leave that property sheet open apparently. We're going to go in here and we're just going to put a negative sign right in front of this list price part. So just put a minus right in front of the bracket that starts the list price field. Now the reason we do this is we want our payment to be a positive number. Normally if you look at all of your payments, they're negative numbers chipping away at the list price. But in this case, and just like if you see any bills sent to your house, you're usually looking at a positive number that you have to pay. So just so it looks like a positive number for us, we're going to invert the list price. So even though there's this pretend big negative value, we're going to put positive numbers in to try to make it to 0, to have the 0 balance. So now that that's revised, we're going to run the query and we'll see that that payment is a positive number, and that's what we're looking for in this case. Now we're in design view of the mortgage payments query right here, and we're going to add a listing field to the 5th column. Now this one's a little strange because sometimes you'll find in my IT lab when you drag it down and you try to make it the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column, putting it right in here, sometimes it doesn't always jump right to the exact right place. But just try to put it into that 5th spot and hopefully it'll take. I've seen times that this is run and it tosses it over here, but don't worry about that. What you're doing and what your instincts are on this is probably correct. Right, left click and drag and drop it exactly where you want it to go, and that's how you can get another one in there without having to put it at the end. Now we're going to switch to Datasheet View. We're going to go over here and see our data as it's listed all out, and you can see our listing is in the 5th field. And we're going to add the totals row. We're going to click on this up here. And what this does is it allows us to automatically build in the totals for these fields. Now that doesn't necessarily just mean adding things up. As a matter of fact, we want the average for the list price. So you click on this field, you can say give me the average of all of that. Now, kind of like what we did in chapter 4 in Excel, this is only the average of what you see. It's not the average of all of the possible records. Remember, we filtered some of these out. We only are including the unsold properties, for example. So it's only going to show you the average of what is visible. If we change the way the query works, it's going to change that value. And we're also going to do a count of the listings. So here's our listings, and we're going to choose the count field. And there's 8 visible, so there's 8 as a count. And we want the average of the price per square foot column. We're going to save the query. We're going to close the query. On the next step here, we're going to make a new query in Query Design. We're going to add in properties and lists. They need to be in that order. And we're going to select the name of list field. We're going to select sales price and listing and sold from the properties table. We're going to display the total row in Design View, and it tosses this extra row in right here, and it allows us to do some neat stuff. In this case, we're going to set the sales price to average. So we're not just going to group by particular sales prices, particular values in there. We're actually going to let that total row supply the average. And for listing, we're going to set to count. So rather than provide any numerical calculation here, we're just going to say how many are there. And then in sold, we're going to use the where clause. And by doing that, we're going to say yes to the criteria. There we go. Careful of this. If you scroll with your mouse in My IT Lab, suddenly these get all off kilter. Make sure that you scroll back up to the top so you're not clicking in the wrong field there. And our criteria is yes. And we'll press enter. And My IT Lab checks it and moves us on to the next step. We'll select the sales price field, and we're going to display the property sheet. Left click, right click, properties. We're going to change sales price to a currency, and we're going to click on listing. Now you'll notice now we're actually modifying the properties for listing. We didn't have to close the property sheet for sales price in order to open it for listing. You can just keep this open if you have lots of changes to make. And we are going to change the caption to number sold, because we don't care about the listing number in this case. We're simply using it as a count field. We'll press enter. We're going to select the sales price field, and we're going to display the property sheet of that. We're going to change this to currency. I feel like I already did this, but I think it was on a different step. I'll click off of that, and we'll try this one more time here. Listing, we choose caption. Oh, I think that's where my problem is. Sales price should be currency. Listing should be number sold. So it looks like I've kind of fallen off here a little bit. I'm going to quickly reset this question and go through this piece again. Sometimes, even though it feels like you're clicking on the right thing, my IT lab is a certain ways down with the problem. Maybe there was a way to pull out of this one, but sometimes it's just easier to just reset that. So we'll go through this quickly again. A new query and query design. Add in properties. Add in lists. Name of list. Sale price. Listing. And sold. We're going to display the total row. And we're going to say sales price is average, listing is count. Oops, wrong spot. Sales price is average, listing is count. And this one's where. Yes. Select sales price field, display the property. Sales price is going to be currency. With the property sheet open, select listing. Caption is now number sold. Press enter. I'm going to save that as results by realtor. Say OK. And we're going to run that query. It can be a little aggravating how the instructions seem to jump away from you as you're trying to complete these steps. And I think that's what threw me off there. I think when it jumped down, I thought it was moving to the next step, but really I just had to do a little bit more in that step by saving off that query. In Datasheet View, this is Datasheet View, we're going to display the totals row. We're going to change, whoop, you may have noticed there it quickly said incorrect action. All we did was turn on the total row, but my IT lab immediately tries to check the work and notice that you hadn't completed it yet. Don't worry about that. It's just something that happens, and it just has to do with the way that my IT lab is grading things. Hopefully you have more than one attempt per question. And we're going to change the total to a sum for the number sold. We're going to go over to Design View, go to a blank column, and we're going to add in days on market, and then colon space. And I want the difference between the date listed field and 4/1/2016. This one's a little interesting because now we're using a date as one of our fields in this formula. So I'm going to do bracket date listed, close my bracket, and I'm going to do a divided by, and then I'm going to put in a space because I don't want it to get thrown off here. Something that seems to happen is if you type it in without a space, sometimes we run into some trouble. So 4/1/2016, and then the pound sign again. And if you're ever in doubt, you can always put spaces next to your operators, your division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. The only time you wouldn't want to do that is kind of like in the other step that we did where we negated the list price field. That one had to be right up against list price. But if you're ever in a quandary here, you can always put that extra space in, and it's actually a good habit to get in, both for readability and so that there's no possible conflicts with strange characters. So I'm putting a space in between date listed and the division sign and then the date. So date listed space divided by space 4/1/2016. And when I click off of that, it did say incorrect action, but that's actually because I haven't completed the next step yet, and that's what it's looking for. So the total row will be average for days on market. Oops, that one is not a division. We've been doing a lot of division here. This one is not division, this one is subtraction. We're talking about a difference. We're not talking about dividing. So that's why I got that error. Now I'm going to change that total row to average for days on market. And we need to display the property sheet and change that format to fixed. Right click, properties, format, fixed. And we'll run the query and we should see the proper information. So that is Access Chapter 3 skill-based training.